In this video, I'll demonstrate how to use data in a SQL Server database to augment user profiles in SharePoint Server 2010. I will create external content types, create a synchronization connection, map profile properties, and then run profile synchronization. In this scenario, user profiles already exist. I've been synchronizing them with Active Directory domain services. But there's additional information in a SQL Server database that I want to add to the profiles. The HR database has a table called Employee Info that contains the date on which each employee was hired. A second table, called Employee School, contains the schools that each employee attended. I want to add the hire date and schools attended to user profiles. To add data from a business system such as SQL Server to a user profile, I first have to create external content types to bring the data into SharePoint. To do that, I'll go to SharePoint Designer. I'll start by creating a new external content type for the items in the Employee Info table. I'll name this external content type Hire Date. Now I need to create a connection to the database. I'll click here to discover external data sources and add a connection. This will be a SQL Server connection. I have a simple setup with SharePoint and SQL Server running on the same computer. I'm just going to connect to the database with the user's identity. In a production environment, you would probably want to connect with an impersonated Windows identity and use the Secure Store service to map users to a different identity. The hire date comes from the Employee Info table. I only need to read data from the table, so I'll select New Read Item operation and click Next to accept the names for the operation. The value in the username column will identify which profile to add the information to. To indicate this, I'll select the data source element, select Map to Identifier, then click Next. I'll select username again as the identifier to map to, and then click Finish. I'll save the hire date external content type. Now I'll create a second external content type for the schools an employee attended. I'll name this external content type School Attended and find the external data source. The data will come from the Employee School table. Because there can be a one-to-many relationship between employees and schools, I'll create a new Read List operation and click Next to accept the names for the operation. An employee might have attended multiple schools, so I'll need to provide a way to find the schools for a given employee. To do this, I create a comparison filter. I'll click Add Filter Parameter and select Username as the data source. This is the column that I want to filter on. I won't specify a default value. The value to match will be provided during synchronization. Now I click Click to Add to create the filter. I'll name the filter Schools for Employee, then click OK to save it. Click Next. I want both the username and the school name to be returned in the external content type, and username is the field that will be used to match instances of the external content type to user profiles, so I'll select Map to Identifier for that parameter. Finished. Now I'll save the School Attended external content type. I've finished creating the external content types. I'll go to Central Administration. Because the User Profile Synchronization service runs under the Farm account, I need to give the Farm account permission to execute operations on the external content types. I'll click Manage Service Applications and select the Business Data Connectivity service. I'll select the hire date external content type and then click Set Object Permissions. I'll add the Farm account and give it the Execute and Set permissions, and then click OK. Then I'll repeat the process for the School Attended external content type. Because I set up the external content types to connect to SQL Server with the user's identity, the farm account also has to have DB data reader permission on the HR database. If I had set up the external content type to use a secure store group ID, I'd add the farm account to the members list of the group ID. At this point, I've created the external content types and granted the necessary permissions. Now I can create a synchronization connection. From Central Administration, I'll click Manage Service Applications and select the User Profile Service application. I'll click Configure Synchronization Connections and create a new connection to the hire date external content type. I'll name the first connection HR Hire Dates. It is a business data connectivity connection. I'll click the external content type picker and select the hire date external content type that I just created. Each employee has one hire date, so I'll select one-to-one mapping. Now I have to identify which profile property should be used to match profiles with hire dates. I chose username as the identifier when I created the external content type. On the SQL Server side, this is the attribute that will be matched. On the SharePoint side, the user profile property that I want to compare to the username is account name, and click OK to save the connection. I'll create a second connection and name this one HR Schools. It's a business data connectivity connection. The external content type is school attended. An employee might have attended more than one school, so I'll select one-to-many mapping. The filter I created, Schools for Employee, is already selected. That filter returns all instances of the external content type that have the same username. I want the profile property account name to match username. I'll click OK to save the connection. Now I have to map the new profile properties. I'll go back to Central Administration, click Manage Service Applications, and select the User Profile Service application. In the People section, I'll click Manage User Properties. I'll find the hire date property, click the arrow next to the property, and then select Edit. The Mapping section is at the bottom of the page. The hire date comes from the HR Hire Dates connection. The hire date attribute is already selected as the default, and I'm importing the data. I'll click Add to add the mapping, and then OK. Now I'll edit the Schools property. The data for this property comes from the HR Schools connection. The school name attribute is already selected as the default, and I'm importing the data. I'll click Add, and then OK. Back to Central Administration. Click Manage Service Applications, and select the User Profile Service application. Now I can start synchronization. Because I changed property mappings, I have to perform a full synchronization. I'll click OK to start it. The synchronization progress is shown on the right. This page does not refresh automatically. I have to refresh the page in the browser to see changes in status. A full sync can take quite a long time. I've sped things up in the video so we don't have to wait. When the status returns to idle, synchronization is complete. Let's take a look at the results. I'll click Manage User Profiles and search for Carol. Let's look at her profile. Carol's hire date contains a value, and the schools property was populated with the schools she attended. In this video, I synchronized SharePoint user profiles with data from SQL Server. Thanks for watching.